What's up, everybody? It's Travis here from Travis.media. No quirky intros, no gimmicks today. We're going straight to the content. Actually, quick note, in a lot of my old videos, I used to do these intros, these amazing Grammy-nominated intros. I had the PHP diss, I had the COVID lockdown, I had all these great intros. And you guys in the comments killed me. You were like, Travis, these intros suck. Travis, please skip the intros. These are horrible. They have nothing to do with the video. So, like always, I listen to you guys. I took them out, never to do them again. We're going straight to the content. So what are we talking about today? Today we're talking about DevOps engineering, specifically how you can become one in 2023. What is a DevOps engineer and what skill set do you have to learn? And I'm targeting two groups of people today. Number one, those who are already developers, those already in the industry, they have an interest in DevOps, and they want to know how can I shift from a developer, from an application developer, over to DevOps engineering. That's one group. But we're also going to talk about this second group. This second group of people are the people who are like, I'm either now learning to code, or I'm thinking about learning to code, and I don't want to go this traditional web development route. I don't want to do HTML. I don't want to do CSS. I don't want to manipulate web pages. I don't want a front end. I just want to learn a coding language, do some cloud computing, some automation, and get right into DevOps. I don't like the applications. I don't want to go that route. I want to learn very specific things and go straight into DevOps. We're going to talk about that group too and whether that's even doable in this video. So let's get started. So first, let's talk about DevOps itself. What is DevOps? And when you ask this, you get 50 different answers. Well, I'm going to give you a traditional answer the way I see it. I know now people are like, well, we got site reliability engineering, we got platform engineering, we got all this stuff. I'm going to give you my traditional definition, the way I see it and the way I still see it. So imagine you have a group of devs, you have these developers, and you have this operations team. So you have these developers writing the code, you have the operations guys managing the servers. So the developer writes the code, he pushes to GitHub, he takes all of his changes, pushes it to a server, it gets over to the server, and it breaks. And he's like, hey, my application isn't working. Hey, server guys, my application isn't working. And the server guys are like, so? The servers are fine. And the developer guy's like, well, it worked on my machine. Why is it not working over there? The operations guy's like, I don't know, that's your problem. Developer's like, no, that's your problem, because it's your system. And there's this big debate over whose problem it is. So these developers are sending stuff to the server, things are not working properly, whose problem? So DevOps arose to fix this problem, to come up in between the two groups and enable both of them to work together by automating the process so that it works every time. So if you're currently a developer, the key here is that you're enabling developers in enabling operations to do their job better. If you become a DevOps engineer, you're no longer an application developer. Okay, you can't think in code bases and front ends and applications and GUIs and all that stuff. Your job is actually enabling those people, making the job for those people easier. And you do so by automating what's called the software development lifecycle. So I looked online and I found this chart here. You can find them everywhere in all different fashions, but this one looked pretty good to me. And what you have here is this continuous flow, note the infinity symbol, a continuous flow between development and operations. And this is basically your blueprint as a DevOps engineer. You're going to sit in between development and operations, and you're going to automate the whole process so that everything runs smoothly between the two via this software development lifecycle. So let me explain this chart real quick. So you have planning, and all of this is continuous. You can put the word continuous in front of everything because it just continues. So let's start out with this plan part of the chart. So planning. Planning is just agile practices. So think Scrum, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But basically you're planning your work, you're breaking it into smaller pieces and assigning it out for people to do. That's your planning. Then you move on to the code section, which is your developers writing code and pushing that code to GitHub or wherever, some code repository. And there's many engineers doing that. So this group of developers is working together, they're coding the application or whatever it is, and they're all pushing their code up to this version control. Then there's the building and testing part of things. This is also called CI. We'll talk about that in a minute. So building and testing, you're basically committing your code in Git, which kicks off a build of your artifact, and it runs your tests. This might be performance tests, bug tests, code tests. Now CI stands for continuous integration. So continuous integration allows developers to merge code into the code branch many times per day. Each merge triggers a code build, which is like compiling, in a testing sequence of some sort. And the goal of this testing is to produce an artifact that's safe to deploy. And that artifact may be a binary, a container, or some kind of website build. It's making sure this version of code that I'm pushing is safe to be deployed. So you're building, you're testing, the CI portion of this, and then you move on to the release and deployment. Now the release and deployment part of it is the CD. So you hear in a lot of DevOps, CI, CD, continuous integration, and then CD, which is continuous delivery or continuous deployment. There's a small difference between the two. So you've compiled your code, you've tested it, you've determined that it's safe to be deployed. And the CD part of it is the deployment or release of that code out to the server. And a lot of times this hits a gate, which some team lead or something is going to have to manually accept it to move it down the pipeline. But just think, code is now deployed. The next section is this operate and monitor. So in this operate monitor section, applications are being maintained, they're being monitored, problems are being noted, engineers are ensuring high availability, all of these things. So there's the operate and monitor part of it. And this all leads to some kind of feedback. So here's the problems, here's the limitations, the things we ran into. That goes right back into planning. And that's the cycle. We plan, we code, we build and test it, CI. We release and deploy it, CD. There's the operate and monitor part, where we're seeing how it works, making sure it's fine, noting the problems. And all of that feedback goes back into planning. It's a continuous infinity loop. That's the software development lifecycle. So now that we've looked at that and we've talked about what DevOps is, what skill sets should current developers learn? So you're already in the field, you're already a developer. What skill sets should you learn to become a DevOps engineer? Maybe you like the philosophy. Maybe you like automating all the things and you're just interested in becoming one. What skill sets should you learn? So here's a few that I've noted. Number one, version control. But you're already a developer. You already know this. Let's move on. Number two, Linux. You can't get by Linux. Everywhere I go, there's Linux. All major servers are running Linux. I had a comment in a past video where this guy was like, I've been in the IT business 20 years and I've never used Linux. Mind-blowing to me. Not saying I don't believe you. I just can't believe that's a thing. But maybe you're in a Windows shop or work for some company that just deals with Windows. I don't know. But in my experience, you need to be comfortable in Linux. Number three, coding. You got to know at least one major coding language like Python or JavaScript or C# or Golang or something like that, which you already know because you're a developer. So let's move on. Number four, you need to understand on the surface agile development. Now, agile development is just incremental, time-based, lean approaches to the delivery of projects. So you have this window of time called a sprint. So let's say 2 weeks is your sprint. That's what I'm used to. So what happens at the beginning of those 2 weeks, you have this sprint planning where all the work, all the things you need to do comes in and you go over it and you assign it out to all of your engineers on the team. And then you have these daily stand-ups. Every single day, you have this stand-up, and each person on the team gives a report on what they're working on and how their status is going. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, all of the code that's on development or staging or whatever gets pushed out to prod. Or maybe you push it sooner than that. It can depend. But the point is, you got 2 weeks, you got all the work comes into the beginning, you divvy out the work, and then at the end, you push everything out, you sit down, see where the problems went, have the new problems come in, and then you go back, you plan for the next 2 weeks. And it's this continuous cycle. And it keeps you in this cycle of delivering the work. Actually, I got a picture here. Here's a good idea. It's by Edureka. I'm not stealing your picture here, I'm just using it. It's very good. But basically, here's the first iteration. This would be the first sprint. You discover the problems, you design what to do, and you develop it. That swirls into the second iteration. So your first iteration, we did this. We need to make it better the second time. Second time, you discover what makes it better, what the problems are. You design it, you develop it. You go into the third iteration. In sprint after sprint, you're meeting goals, you're making the application or whatever better. You're fixing the problems, and it's this ongoing betterment of the project. And you can Google it and get a better explanation than what I'm trying to say, but make sure you have a base understanding of agile development or Scrum, whatever you want to call it. I think agile is a subset of Scrum. Oh, and there's a Scrum Master. All right, number 5, operations. You need to understand the operations side of things. This is probably the biggest thing with developers, is they're busy writing the code and stuff. A lot of them don't know the operations side. They don't know servers. They don't know the maintenance of servers and networking and all of that stuff that the operations team is good at. And my cheat here to get good at operations is just get cloud certified somewhere. Go to AWS learn AWS, and pass the Certified Solutions Architect Associate certification. That'll teach you lots about operations and networking and servers. You'll learn a bunch of stuff on that side of things. And if you want to take it a step further, look into the Associate SysOps certification. That one's a bit hard, but if you pass that one, you'll have a really good understanding of operations. I mean, everybody's moving to the cloud or already in the cloud. I would just do that. Number 6, you got to learn Kubernetes and Docker. Well, Docker, then Kubernetes. One of the big problems with developers is it works on my machine, but it doesn't work on his machine. Or he gave me this code and I can't get it to run. Well, Docker makes it so you have this Docker image that you can build, and it's the same on every computer. It builds this container. On your computer, it builds a container. His computer builds a container, and it all runs the same. You don't have any problem. It works on his machine. It works on my machine. And then Kubernetes is a container orchestration platform where you deploy that container, and you set up networking and all this stuff. And all of your containers run there. They're self-healing. If they crash, another one will come up. It's like the industry standard for DevOps engineers. So learn Docker, then learn Kubernetes. I have a YouTube video. I'll link it above. You can learn Docker in an hour. I'll explain it to you in 1 hour. Make sure you check that out. I got another one where I kind of go over Kubernetes, but it's surface level. And you should probably get a course to go deeper into Kubernetes because that one's a little bit more complex. Number 7, understand infrastructure as code. Just go learn Terraform. Infrastructure as code is just a way of saying, I have this infrastructure, these servers, this private network, these disks, and all this other stuff. And all of that is being represented in this YAML file, this code. And what I can do is I can just run this code and it'll build all the stuff for me. So here's my configuration. Here's all of my infrastructure in a YAML file. I can run it and it'll build all of that infrastructure. And then I can run a destroy command. It'll destroy all the infrastructure. So if my environment gets wiped out, I can run this file and build it all back again. Or if I make changes, I can just make changes to the file and run the difference. That's all infrastructure as code is. So for this, just learn Terraform. Or if you're going the cloud computing route, you're going to get AWS certified, just go over CloudFormation. CloudFormation is AWS's infrastructure as code solution. Just learn that. Number 8, just learn Ansible. You got to know some kind of configuration management, and Ansible is kind of the standard for that. People might say learn Chef or Puppet, just learn Ansible. On all the DevOps applications out there, they just want you to know Ansible. And that's basically all I'm doing here. On the DevOps applications, they'll be like, you got to know Linux, you got to know Scrum, you got to know some operations, you got to know Kubernetes, Docker, Ansible, and whatever else I'm going to tell you. That's all I'm doing here. But just learn Ansible. It can be learned pretty quick. Probably a YouTube video and then some practice on your computer. You'll get the gist of Ansible. But it's configuration management. It's a way to send out some configuration change to hundreds of servers or whatever in one command. All right, number 9, and there's only 2 more left. This is 9 out of 10. Number 9 is learn Jenkins, okay? Jenkins is everywhere. I think a lot of people now just hate it because it's Java, but you can't get by it. Everybody uses Jenkins still, and it's because it's compatible with everything. It just works, and it's been out there for a long time. Now, Jenkins is a tool that can automate your entire testing phase using tools like Selenium or JUnit. These are tools that integrate with Jenkins. So they can automate your whole testing phase. It can compile your code every time you push it, test it, and deploy it. And like I said, it integrates with everything. It's CI, it's CD, all in one package. So do some kind of course out there on Jenkins and get to know that. Now again, if you're going the cloud computing certification route, you can learn AWS's tools. They have a suite of DevOps tools called Code Commit, Code Build, and Code Pipeline that cover the version control, testing, building, and deployment part of things. So you can learn that as well. And then finally, you got to learn some kind of monitoring solution. And see here, I'm kind of going through this DevOps lifecycle. I'm just giving you 1 or 2 of the main apps that match with each section on this lifecycle. So the last one would be Monitor. You got to learn a monitoring tool. Funny story, when I got hired as a site reliability engineer, they asked me, hey Travis, are you familiar with ELK? And I was like, not really, because most are out west. I live in Virginia. And they were like, and I was like, they were talking about the ELK stack, not the animal. So ELK, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. And I think most people are using Grafana now. But you got to learn these monitoring tools as well, because monitoring is a big part of DevOps engineering. You can also learn something like Splunk. That's another popular monitoring tool. So those are 10 tools you got to learn for current developers. These are the skill sets you should go through. You don't have to master all of them. Just get familiar with each one And then try to automate things on your own. Try and develop an automation mindset. When you're at work and you're coding and stuff, try to think about ways to automate repetitive tasks. Or if somebody's having trouble with something, they're always having trouble with this one thing, help them automate it if you have time. Try to develop this automation mindset. Practice with these tools and you'll do well. You're already a developer. It's just a matter of adding these skills to your repertoire. Now, before I move on to the new developer section, how new developers can go straight to DevOps, I want to talk about how you can actually learn these skills whatever camp you're in. If you're a developer looking to add on the DevOps skills, or if you're brand new looking to learn it all, I think I found a good resource for you. Now, of course, you can go to YouTube, you can go to Udemy. There's a bunch of places you can learn DevOps. You can learn all of these skills one by one. But a lot of people have been telling me about Zero to Mastery, and I checked their website out, and they have a career path called Become a DevOps Engineer. And it literally covers everything that I've mentioned here. So what you'll learn, look here, learn about Linux, CI/CD, backend infrastructures, databases, which I forgot, AWS Cloud, monitoring and logging, and infrastructure as code. This is the whole package. Combine knowledge from different fields to become a well-rounded DevOps engineer for many years to come. Now, the career path starts with learning Linux and become a Linux sysadmin. And then there's like a blog. Then there's AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner, which is like the intro certification. So that's good. There's Terraform. We mentioned that. Here's Bash scripting, which is very important too. I mentioned Python, which is the key language, but Bash is something you also gotta know. But if you learn Python, picking up Bash is pretty easy. And you'll probably learn it by way of Python. Then it moves on to AWS Certified Solutions Architect. That's the second certification. That's the one that I recommended. Then there's the Complete Python Developer. So you're learning Python. Then there's the Master the Coding Interview, System Design and Architecture Part 1. This is really interesting. This will be really helpful to the infrastructure side of things in your DevOps journey. Then there's the SQL and Databases Bootcamp. Then there's some soft skills. And finally, there's a Node.js developer, which I don't think you would need. And then some other courses here. But essentially, it covers most of the skills, minus the Ansible and Jenkins, unless it's covered somewhere. And actually, this Terraform course will get you Terraform certified, so that's neat too. And like I said, Bash scripting is very important. So I'm not saying go take this course, but I think it covers everything. And I think it's a good, structured path to becoming a DevOps engineer. Wanted to mention that. Now, the section we've been waiting for, what about you new developers? Is it possible to go from zero to hero? Nah. Is it possible, though, to go from a brand new developer, either just thinking about getting started or one that just got started learning to code? Is it possible to go from that straight through to DevOps engineering, skipping the whole web development route? My answer is yes, but it's going to be hard. But I think it's doable, and here's why. When you go the web development route, the traditional web development route, you're learning HTML, you're learning CSS, you're learning JavaScript, you're probably learning like Node.js or PHP or something like that. If you go this route, you don't have to learn any of that. You don't have to worry about making things work on the web page using CSS. You don't have to learn about DOM manipulation. You don't have to learn those tools. So being able to skip that whole section makes your goals shorter so that you have, in replacement of those sections you skipped, DevOps stuff. And a couple of months ago, I released this Python AWS blueprint. And essentially, you learn Python. You don't do the web development route. You don't do that. You learn Python well while you're learning AWS and preparing for the Solutions Architect Associate certification. And in that blueprint, you also learn Linux. So if you look at these 10 we just looked at, Linux is covered, a coding language, Python is covered, cloud computing covered, and you'll probably learn about the AWS DevOps tools, and you'll probably learn about CloudFormation. That's 5 of the 10 in that blueprint. So that's an option. There'll be a link below to that. But ultimately, here's what you would need to learn. So forget about HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Forget about all that. Here's what you would learn if you're trying to go straight to DevOps. You got to learn one coding language, which of course you're going to choose Python because Python is the most used in DevOps. I don't care what anybody says. You can say Go, you can say JavaScript. I don't care. It's always Python. Learn Python well. Learn Linux. Get a cloud computing certification. Learn Kubernetes and Docker. That's going to be a tough one. Learn Ansible and Jenkins. Learn Terraform or CloudFormation if you're in AWS. And learn these monitoring tools that I mentioned before. Now that may seem like a lot, and it is a lot, And that's why I said it's not easy. And that's largely because a DevOps engineer has the dev skill and the ops skill. That's why usually, traditionally, the DevOps engineer was once a developer or once an operations guy. And you're trying to do it from scratch. So it's going to be hard work, but you're not going to go the web developer route. You're going to go this alternative route. And you're going to be very specific about what you take. You're going to learn these skills. You're going to start building pipelines. You're going to go in AWS or Azure or GCP. You're going to start building pipelines. You're going to start thinking automation. You're going to start automating all the things. You're going to save all of this configuration and all of this stuff in GitHub. You're going to be focused, intentional, and you're going to go out there and try to become a DevOps engineer. The rest is you. Put in the work. Prove to people you know the work. That's all it takes. And that's DevOps engineering. That's my video today. I hope it was helpful. If it was, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.